Greetings and welcome to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast. I'm Greg Drevenstedt, Editor-in-Chief at Rider Magazine. Hope you enjoyed our interview with former Army paratrooper Perry Steed on episode 52. He was interviewed by our associate editor Paul Dale, who wrote a feature about Steed called Riding for Light that was published in the October 2022 issue of Rider. Our guest on episode 53 is Darryl Cannon. He's a photographer better known as Killboy. If you've ridden the Tail of the Dragon in Tennessee, then you've seen Killboy banners along the road where he and his team of photographers capture motorcycles in action. I really enjoyed speaking with Killboy. He shares his backstory of hard work, dedication, and entrepreneurial spirit. Killboy went from being a factory worker who enjoyed riding his motorcycle on the Dragon on weekends to teaching himself photography and building a thriving business. I also tell the story about my first encounter with Killboy during my first press launch back in 2008. It was an embarrassing moment that has been preserved for posterity. You can see some of Killboy's photos in our report from the Continental Road Attack 4 tire launch in the February 2023 issue of Rider and on ridermagazine.com. You can also check out his photos at his website, killboy.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode. We welcome your feedback as well as your suggestions for guests or topics. Send an email to rider@ridermagazine.com. Killboy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I just have to say I've known you for years, but until you shot the Continental Road Attack 4 press launch back in November, you and I had never met in person. And I remember I shared with you kind of a confessional story about the first time I had contact with you from a distance. You were behind the lens. But I just want to, for most of our listeners that probably know your name, Killboy, you're a photographer. You're best known for shooting Tail of the Dragon. That's the section of US 129 with the famous 318 curves in 11 miles near Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Deals Gap. So, you've been shooting there for years. That's a very famous road, gets a lot of traffic. So give us a little background. How'd you get started doing that?
Man, I just fell ass backwards into it. Are we allowed to curse on this thing?
Go for it.
So yeah, it was just it was one of these weird things that I was just sort of an opportunist, always have been, and saw the opportunity, the potential of doing something kind of fun there. And I'd never, I was pretty young back then. I was just working. I'd just gone from retail work into sort of factory work for several years at that point. And I was a forklift operator. I was a material handler at the time that I started this gig. And so I rode my motorcycle some from time to time, and I would go out to the Dragon and with some buddies or something like that from 2 hours away. We lived in Middle Tennessee at the time, and I just sort of was hanging out. And I'm fair skinned. I couldn't really hang out at the overlook with all that sun up there and everything that everybody else hangs out at. So I would hang out in the turns and just sort of take a break between rides in the shade. And I won this gift certificate at work for like $400 for, attendance or something like that. So it was at like Circuit City at the time, that when that used to still be a thing. And digital cameras were just becoming a thing. And I thought, oh, that'd be cool. I get a little digital camera and just goof off with it, and it took every bit of that certificate to get a basic ass digital camera point and shoot back then.
Yeah.
They were expensive and they ate batteries like crazy. But yeah, I just started playing around with the digital camera. I'd never been into photography, never took any classes on it or anything, never even had a film camera of my own before digital cameras. And it just grew, I just started playing around with it. And I was running a website back then. I registered the domain killboy.com. It was just a gaming nickname that I picked up from a band that I liked, The Offspring. They got a song called Killboy Powerhead. And I thought, oh, that'd be a cool gaming nickname. And so I registered the .com and was just goofing off on it. And I started like posting about what I was doing on the motorcycle and going to the Deals Gap, the Dragon at the time. And nobody was really doing blogs and stuff back then. This was in like late 90s.
Wow.
And
yeah.
So it was kind of a thing that people started following and keeping up with what was going on out there. Nobody else was really doing it for that road at the time, reports and things. And it was mostly a lot of writing back then. I did more writing than I was photos, but started posting photos and people were like, hey, take my picture and put it up there so I can download it, put it on my phone or whatever. So you can make a living at this, man. Started getting in my head. So for a couple of years, I just goofed off with it and got better equipment, did the best I could. And then finally in like 2001, I decided, okay, I'm going to try this and put them on a store website and see what happens. And it took right off, and I started getting orders and couldn't really, it was busting my ass to work a full-time 40+ hour a week material handling job and then also run up to the Dragon, get the photos on the weekend. So it was pretty short order. Within like a couple of months, I just quit my job and went full-time on this. And then Ron and Nancy, we kind of started talking at the Overlook, and they were like, why don't you just move over here into one of our spare warehouses with some living space and you don't have to drive back and forth. And so that began that partnership with Tale of the Dragon, so that we sort of have a symbiotic relationship. They use the photos to promote their business, and that in turn promotes my business. And, we've helped each other that way. But
so you're
yeah, that's
talking
how it
about
grew.
are you talking about the Deals Gap Resort there? I know like at one end where like Tail of Dragon intersects with NC 28, there's that store and there's some cabins and it's a whole little resort, and there's that Tree of Shame. That's the place that most people are probably familiar with to get souvenirs and stuff. Is that the area you're talking about?
No, this is across the road from them.
Okay.
So there's like a competing businesses now. So Deals Gap Motorcycle Resort has their own souvenirs, and they've got the hotel and the restaurant. It's a really good place too. And then across the street, Tale of the Dragon is Ron and Nancy Johnson's thing, and they've trademarked that term, and they sell their own brand of
Gotcha.
t-shirts,
Okay.
and they're the ones that sort of started the calling the road that. And that's a whole controversial thing. There's like what the road is actually called and how it all started. There's a lot of misconceptions about that. But yeah, it's across the street there is where their store is. And then they have a strong online presence. They started a website that lists what's going on, what events are coming, so you can sort of plan a trip and know a little bit about what's going on before you get there and things like that. So it's a lot of good information on their website, and they have some great products. And like I said, they've trademarked that phrase, that Tail of the Dragon is theirs. So they are the only place where you can legally get those things. You can find them
Gotcha.
sometime
Okay,
in
that
grocery
makes sense.
stores.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so
It's hard.
you've been doing this pretty steady. I mean, you started in late 90s, so that's, early days of the internet, that in terms of people using it, it was before social media. And then 2001, you started doing this more regularly, but you're still doing your full-time job plus this on the side. So this is basically you're trying to build the business as
Well,
yes.
this is my full-time job, the
Oh my.
photography.
No,
Yeah,
no, I mean
yeah.
by then though, at some point you were doing
Oh,
well enough
yeah.
to be able to quit your job and do this full time.
Yeah, and I was kind of frustrated with, I mean, I was one of those naive young people that would work, whatever they wanted me to do, and I busted my ass. I've always been real, focused worker, and so I was in a position at that point where I was kind of irritated anyway with where I was working, because somebody had quit and they were asking me to cover for them, and it had been like 6 months, and they're
Right.
like, yeah, we're going to bring somebody else on. Well, you're going to pay me double while I'm doing two people's work because I'm
Right.
busting it here. So they were profiting and benefiting from me working so hard. So I think and the whole shop was getting ready to get that factory was getting ready to get shut down anyway. It was already had been made clear that we only had about 6 months and they were just going to close up shop anyway. So at this place, so I was going to have to find another job anyway. So I just at one point there on a Friday, I just laid my badge on my desk and walked out and was like, I'm not even coming back. And that's the only time I've ever not turned in like a 2-week notice. But they had kind of pissed me off to the point that I was just tired of it anyway. So it worked out pretty fortuitous that I had this thing sort of taunting me to come do this, and I'd never done anything, run my own business. I didn't know anything about that. So I've crash course learned a lot about running your own business, and how to, we're still always learning on bookkeeping and taxes and things like that for running your own business. It's not easy stuff. Having your own gig is got its pros and cons, and there's definitely more pros, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot of work, a lot of headache, a lot of stress sometimes.
Absolutely.
And we've learned a lot along the years, and we're still learning all the time.
So you've been, let's say we're going back, it's 2023. So you've been doing this full time for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
You were doing this all by yourself. And obviously, like I said, you had a lot to learn. I've run my own business before. I know what you mean. Like there's the saying that's like, oh, if you own your own business, you have the freedom to work whenever you want, which means
No,
work all the
you're
time.
always working. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
always working. You're never
exactly.
done. Yeah.
But the cool thing, I could see how, I've worked for a motorcycle magazine since 2008. Before that, I was just a regular motorcyclist. I used to live in the Southeast. I did actually originally from Nashville, and I rode the Dragon for the first time in like 2005. So I probably, you probably captured some photos of me back then, but I don't remember buying them. But once I started working for a magazine, like I go to press launches, I go to, I do photo shoots. So I'm very fortunate in that I have professional photographers capture me in action on motorcycles all the time. That's what we do and feature in the magazine. But for most motorcycle owners and car owners and anybody like that, they don't, I mean, you can take a static photo of your car or motorcycle parked somewhere, but to get somebody else on the side of the road, capture a good action photo of them riding or driving is difficult and a rare thing to do. So I can see why, especially somebody wants to ride this famous road like Tail of the Dragon, and then they get to have this like the super cool souvenir, which is a photo that can be blown up and made into a poster, or they can put it on social media or whatever, is a great thing. So you can offer something to people that not really many people can.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's hard to take a picture of yourself. It's hard to even get a friend to get a picture that looks to this level. We get so much practice at it. Our guys shoot over 50,000 photos a week on average. So we get tons of practice. We know where all the good angles are, where to be for the light, to be the best and things like that. We don't shoot super creative. We do get some grumblings from customers about, I wish you guys shot a longer shutter speed, and we'd love to, but we only get sometimes we only get one shot, and then it's busy. So it's different if you're at a racetrack and the people are going around and around and around and around. You get all day, so you can take 5,000 shots and get 100 good ones. That's fine, but you can't do that on the Dragon. We don't get the opportunity to reshoot a lot of these people. They're coming through one time. They're in a crowd of bikes, and so we can't get too risky or creative with the shutter speed, but we do still shoot a lower shutter speed than anybody else out there, but it's still not a super draggy, lots of motion type of thing. And I love those. I would love to be able to do that. And if somebody's going back and forth, our guys are typically shooting in a mode where they can rip the shutter speed down right quick, get a couple of those long exposures, maybe take 5 shots and 2 of them are good type of thing, and then go back to our regular, sort of safe shutter speed. But yeah, to get that kind of shot as a rider, in action is something that you're blessed with, like you said, because of your position that you're in. But for most people, it's a hard thing to do. So to be able to provide that and know what it means to people, we get some of these just amazing stories about, and it's very humbling. It reminds us to stay focused, how it means so much to them. That was the last ride with their father before he passed away, or it's the last pictures of their son before he was, sent off, in the military or something like that. So these photos mean a lot to people, and it's very important that we keep that in mind and stay as focused on. This is going to sound kind of, I guess, mean or something, but it's like I tell my guys, we tend to sort of pep up and really get these really killer shots of the things that we're interested in, things that are cool, things that are exciting. But it's the people that are just riding through on the regular stuff, the more boring stuff, if you will, that are our primary customers, and so stay as intensely focused on getting those good shots on those just people poking through or just cruising through on regular vehicles, even though they're not exotic, supercars or crazy fast motorcycles or whatever gets your blood going whenever you're out there shooting. Focus just as intently on the boring stuff as you do on the exciting stuff, because honestly, the exciting stuff is usually the type of customer that's already probably gotten a million photos given to them, in supercars and things like that. They're not even going to purchase that much, but it's just fun to shoot those. I get it. So it's something that we kind of are reminded when we are told these stories by people, and I share them with our guys that, this customer wrote in and said this, real heart touching thing about something that we shot, and it's very humbling. I really appreciate them.
That's great. I mean, if for people who haven't ridden Tail of the Dragon and seen this, so when you guys are shooting, you often have a banner up that will say killboy.com. or and so people can see that. They may not have even known you guys were shooting photos, but that maybe caught their eye. I know that's what happened for me, and it's happened for other people. Is you riding on Tail the Dragon, maybe you're doing this long ride, you're doing Cherhala Parkway, you're doing NC-28, you're doing, riding through Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and you're like, hey, I remember seeing that banner, and you guys. So you were saying you shoot 50,000 photos a week, and so you upload regularly, and then you have them kind of, I don't know exactly how you classify them, I'm sure by day, but like you basically, somebody who rode by and like, hey, they were in that corner, they can go to your website and track down the approximate time that they were there and find whatever photos may be available that your team shot. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that a lot of people kind of take for granted. Is our guys, we actually sort the photos into categories on top of the date and the time. So you start by going to the calendar and click on the date you were there, and then there's categories for like cruisers and full dressers is one category, and that's a big one, and it's hard to split that up any further, but that keeps people from having to look through all the car shots and all the sport bike shots. So our guys are on the side of the road as they're shooting with a laptop in their lap, sorting those photos into those categories while they're shooting. They'll shoot over 10,000 on a busy day each, person. So for the customer to be able to go in and not have to know exactly what time they were there, they can sort of just skim through that category, but it breaks it into a lot smaller chunk of photos they have to look through for that day. And that's something that our guys do while they're shooting, because at the end of the day, the customer wants to look at the photos that night or the next day if possible, and we try to get people to be patient, just be like, enjoy your vacation, they'll be there when you get back home, you don't have to. But I get it, they're excited, and it's very flattering that people want to see their photos. We definitely appreciate that, because that means that they want our business. But we hustle to get them online that night, and they're usually visible the next day, so that the customers can look at them. And we don't upload the service that we use. It creates it automatically generates a smaller file, a thumbnail that goes on the website, and then the full size version doesn't get uploaded, so that makes it go quicker. And when people order, they get their full size when they order, but it's a process that sort of creates a little delayed. It's not instant that you get the thing, but we also get a chance to edit the photos. That way we can't edit all of them before uploading, but when a customer orders, they usually get a better version than what they saw online. And that's another part of our success, I think, is the under promise, over deliver thing. We don't tell people that we do that.
Right.
And it does take us a couple of days when we get jammed with orders. There's a process that we have to go through. They don't understand that. They're like, why didn't I get the photo I just ordered? And it's like, we go through all the photos, and it's like a post office. Everything's getting backed up, and we're going through them as fast as we can, but it can take a day or two. So, but it's worth it, and it's not something that's typically really needed that soon. Sometimes there's a funeral or something and they need the photos quick, and we'll work with them to do that. But for the most part, we tell people, just be patient. Trust me, it's worth it. You're going to get a better picture than you think you will. And that's usually the case. They're very, very happy to wait and then excited with what they get.
I mean, you're turning around photos remarkably fast, but I guess in this day and age, everybody wants everything right now.
And we could set it up to where it would be instantly send. And they would be straight from the camera. But to me, that's amateur. To me, it's professional photographer is always going to at least look over the shot and do any edits. And I think that it's worth it in the long run. It pays off. It's just, it requires a little bit of patience.
I mean, we've run some of your photos in the magazine Ryder runs tour stories, travel stories, and, obviously the Appalachians are a popular place for people to do that. We'll have, Blue Ridge Parkway story, and somebody will do, peel off and go do part of the Tail of the Dragon, or they'll be doing some, Smoky Mountains. And oftentimes this is an individual or a couple of people who are taking photos of their bikes at static scenic locations or with some people. But as you said, even if you've got a buddy who even kind of knows what they're doing, it's hard for them to really frame up that. Most people, unless you've got a long lens, you've got, a nice camera body, all that stuff. Most people don't want to carry that on a motorcycle. So unless you're already a professional photographer, most people are going to try and do what they can with a point and shoot, or even their cell phone. And the bike's going to be really small in frame and all that stuff. So we've had a few people that have like, hey, I've got this trip I took, and the story's good and the photos are decent, and they've got a Killboy photo. And I think I've reached out to you a couple times just to get permission that we can run it, and we give attribution. But I imagine you have people that probably come back to you again and again. They live in the area or this is a destination they go to, and they're like, hey, I know I can get a cool photo of me on my bike. Maybe they got a different bike, maybe they're with friends or something.
Exactly.
And they're
That's
like,
what
hey,
keeps our business going with
exactly.
repeat customers is people change and
Yeah,
change their bikes and they want those new pictures. Yeah.
right, right. Well, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen the popularity of Tail of the Dragon probably just explode over the years. I mean, I wrote it in 2005 and it was pretty popular even then. I was just there on just a summer weekend. I've been there, of course, during the Honda Hoot. And when that was in Knoxville and that was a big motorcycle rally, that was obviously tons of people want to ride that. And then, but there's all kinds of events and car shows and stuff where you've got clubs and things. I'm sure it
Yeah.
can just be an absolute zoo on some weekends.
It ebbs and flows for sure. It's not crazy busier than it's ever been. It's just that when it hits, sometimes it's very packed.
Right.
And then it's weird because you get a lot of reporters when there's a lot of people, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And so there's this tendency of the feed that comes from the experiences that people have being it's crowded, and it's like, well, when nobody's there, there's nobody to report that there's nobody there. You see what I'm saying?
Right, right.
So all
Right.
you get is this sort of one-sided view of it when it's really busy. And so that's why we started doing like continuous all day roadside videos. I just got tired of people talking about how it's so packed you can't do anything. And I'm like, even on the busiest days, look at this. This is not a lie. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to drum up business. This is the video from the whole day. Go to any point in this 8-hour long video, click on it and watch.
Yep.
And I bet you'll see a good 30 seconds to 2 minutes of video where there's nothing on the damn
Yeah.
screen.
Yes, of
They'll come
course.
through in packs and there'll be packs of people frustrated because they're jammed up in a pack. I get it. And that's their experience of what it was like. But the reality is, for the most part, that road stays empty and you
Right.
can get your free time if you just break away from the pack, let it go, pull over, do something to get away from all that. There's a lot of empty time out there on the road, and it's something you don't see unless you sit there on the side of the road taking pictures.
I mean, that makes sense because even like on an interstate or some freeway, like cars have this weird tendency to cluster together. And if you can
Yep.
kind of break through that, and then there'll be this huge long gap, and then you'll catch up to another cluster of cars. And so, and I realize that, that's a double yellow. And so obviously people kind of clump up behind each other or they ride as friends and stuff. But yeah, the Tail of Dragon is, again, I know it's a destination as much as anything else now because it's not only is that an interesting road to ride, but it's close to a lot of other interesting roads. Like I said,
Yeah.
Moonshiner 28 is right there, goes to Fontana Dam, beautiful road, Cherahela Skyway, all of that stuff
Foothills
is
Parkway. Yeah,
Foothill
there's so
Parkway.
many good
It's
roads in the
yeah.
area.
So you can
Did you do the new Foothills Parkway segment the last time you were here? Did you see that about 2 years ago, 3 years ago? They
no,
opened
I
it up.
haven't done anything out there that recent.
Are
No.
you familiar with the Lynn Cove viaducts on the Blue Ridge
Yeah.
Parkway,
Yep.
those bridges? So there's a
Yes.
section now of Foothills Parkway. They've doubled it. So it used to just go from 129 to Townsend. Now it goes from Townsend over to Wares Valley also. So it gets you very close to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg now. It's a more direct way to get from there to the Dragon. So a lot of people are using it. But that new section has a section in it called the Missing Link where they couldn't for decades figure out how to make a road on this one part. And they ended up creating those same types of bridges that go around a mountain. And it's just crazy. They've got this
Oh, that's
big drop
cool.
off on one side. They're beautiful and they're open bridges. They're not, and they're not anything overhead. So it's very spooky to go across them and just to see this big drop off right out there on the other side, but they're very pretty.
I'll
So
have
yeah,
to get back out there. I haven't ridden in that specific area in quite a while. I mean, we did a
yeah.
little bit of Blue Ridge Parkway and some other the roads. When I was out there for the Continental launch, but we didn't ride any. We didn't go that far east, I guess, or I don't know where we were
Yeah,
relative.
it's a long road. The
Yeah,
BRP and
yeah.
that section is way over there on the eastern end.
So
Lynn
my
Cove
my
area.
confession, of course, is that when I met you at the Continental launch, I told you about my very first press launch in 2008, and that was a Triumph launch that was hosted in Gatlinburg. So we stayed at a hotel in Gatlinburg, and again, I had just been hired at Rider Magazine. I had been on the job just a couple of months, and rule number one at a press launch is don't crash.
Right.
So we were
The best
riding. We
bikes.
did a loop from Gatlinburg. We did 441 through the park. We did Moonshiner 28. We did Tail of the Dragon. We did Foothill Parkway as it was at the time. And then from Townsend went back into the park and did this big loop. So that was first day on the B triple 1050, went fine. I think a couple of guys actually got tickets on the Dragon, but the second day we rode a mix of bikes. And when we got to the Dragon, I was on a Tiger 1050, and I was, going into we were a pretty fast group of riders, or I was trying to keep up with a fast group of riders. I went into this corner pretty hot. It was a long kind of carousel left-hander, and I went in and I was leaning and I was leaning and I was leaning, and then something started to drag, and then before I knew it, the rear wheel came off the ground and I was into a ditch. And I of all the places you can crash in the Dragon, this was like kind of a shallow ditch full of like leaves and dirt. I mean, I barely scuffed my gear. The bike was rideable, had just a few scratches on it.
Yeah.
But I picked it up, we got it back on the road. But just across the way, I saw your banner. You were actually shooting that corner. So I, had the ride of shame back to the hotel. I had to call the editor and tell him that I had crashed, and thought I was going to lose my job because, I had broken the golden rule. But I went onto your website and found I think it was about a 12 photo sequence of you capturing me kind of going, and you can see me leaning and leaning and leaning, and then there's sparks, and then there's like, you just see this kind of cloud of dust when I hit into the ditch. And then you've got this great photo. You captured me kind of like holding my helmet and like kind of hanging my head in shame. I wasn't hurt, but so I have these photos that I haven't really shared with many people because it's kind of this embarrassing thing because I work at a magazine, not really supposed to talk about that stuff. But I told you that story at that Continental launch. And then we were at the BMW Performance Center. We're on BMWs. We're testing these Road Attack 4s. And we're doing some of these braking exercises. And as you may recall, because you were there, and is it your wife, Lori, that was there shooting with you?
Yeah.
So we were doing some braking exercises where we were supposed to go from like a dead stop to 30 miles an hour. And once we went across some cones, is basically grab full brake, both front and rear, maximum braking, and come to a stop. And so we did that. And then we did it up to like 50 miles an hour. And when I did that one, I was on a F900R, and once I crossed the cones, I did full brake, but I forgot to get on the rear, and I grabbed a lot of front, and I went into this pretty big stoppie. And I'm not a stunting guy. I can't do a stoppie on purpose.
Unintentional stoppie.
Yeah, unintentional stoppie. And and fortunately it came down gracefully. And you and Lori, I think you got it from two different angles. Both of you.
It totally looked like you meant to do it. It was so well done.
So, but I was so relieved that you didn't end up capturing me crashing twice. Like the two times you shot me would have been
bad
like
luck, Darryl.
me crashing, and I would have crashed in front of this big audience of other journalists and BMW Academy trainers and stuff. But yeah, so I was in the F900R has ABS, but I was in dynamic mode, and so the intervention is less, and so I just got a handful of brake, and I was fast enough, I guess, just enough to get the rear wheel up couple of feet, but boy, I was relieved that it came back down. And actually, we just ran the review of those tires in our January issue, and I've got that stoppy photo. So great job to you and Lori on that.
Yeah, we need to find out where those shots that we got that day are being published or posted or whatever. But yeah, a testament to the tires. They were not terribly warmed up. You were sitting in a group of guys waiting your turn, and they still worked really well. So that was impressive that they performed like that. But the way that it was so smooth, and it looked like you had done it a million times. So
I wish
kudos to you for
so like I said, if I tried to do it, I wouldn't be able to pull it off. So
do you remember when you got the previous photos of the incident at the Dragon from us? Do you remember that we typically do not, well, I mean, we never charge for crash photos. So if somebody orders crash photos, we'll usually do a refund. Do you remember any of that?
I don't, because that was 2008. It was a long time ago. I mean, I would have gladly paid for them, but that you may have comped them to me. I may have even
usually we'll just go ahead and do a refund.
Yeah.
So we don't feel it's right to. We'll first of all, we try not to post up in places where people crash a lot, but I mean, people crash everywhere. It's weird.
Sure. Yeah.
They'll crash in the weirdest places, but there is I think I know what you're talking about. If it's what I'm thinking, it's a long double apex turn really. And people hit the first apex and it sort of starts to open up. And then there's a tighter little second apex. And some people struggle with that, especially if you don't know it to run out between apexes, they'll end up hugging the double yellow basically between the two apexes, and it sets you up wrong for the second one. So it's a really fun turn to nail.
Right.
And to get it right, you almost have to like come in too fast and turn in too early, which is a no-no most of the time, on a motorcycle. And then you run out between the apexes and then come back in and catch the second one. It's just beautiful if you do it right. But a lot of people don't have it memorized like that.
Sure.
It took me like 2 years to get that road started memorized.
Yeah,
And
I've only ridden it a few times, and not and as many corners as there are on that road. I certainly didn't have it mapped out in my head.
right. Yeah. It's a
For
lot
me,
to
I know it
learn.
was a certain amount of exuberance. I was riding with a very skilled group of riders. Neil Bailey was one of the people on that press launch at the time. I know he was with you at the Continental launch.
Yeah.
That they were just skilled riders, and they were going at a good pace, and I was just in a little bit over my head for my
It's a
skill
funny
set.
that's it's almost always the case that if people do crash, they're usually not by themselves.
Yeah, they get sucked
They're
in.
they're either trying to stay in front of somebody to show them how fast they can ride, or they're trying to keep up with somebody that's maybe a little quicker than them. And
Right.
it tends to we all do it. I mean, I've been there too, but I've wrecked a couple of times by myself, but a
Sure.
lot of times it's with other people. Yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, on the subject of crashing, I don't really want to glorify anything, but I mean, you've been shooting there for years. I'm sure you've probably seen some pretty crazy stuff. So whether it's wild vehicles or, I mean, I would think the problem that you get into at a place like the Dragon is that people are just, like you say, they're trying to show off. They're trying to show off to their buddies or even to complete
To the
strangers.
camera.
What?
Yeah,
Or the camera.
sometimes to the camera. Yeah, some people chill out. It's a hit or miss thing. Some people get a little bit harder when they see the camera, and we get blamed for that. And it's like, well, we see almost an equal number of people that sort of straighten up. They're cutting it
Right.
up or something like that,
Right.
and they're cutting lanes, and then they see us, and they're like, whoop, they straighten up. So
Right.
it's a 50-50 thing. But yeah, we see a lot out there. We see a lot of people, you know, pushing it. Some crashes. It's a long road, and people think that we see every crash out there. We don't.
No.
A lot of people crash in other places, but it's really a safe place to ride and crash. I'd rather take my chances with low speed and leaves and trees than the higher speeds and the guardrails of some of the other roads around there. Their percentages of serious injuries are way higher on other roads, but the frequency of crashing is pretty high on the Dragon. We see probably 10 to 12 on a busy day.
Sure.
People wrecking, as far as like leaving the pavement is
Right.
a wreck, if you run off into the ditch or something like that. But actual fatalities is probably like two or three. It is two or three a year on average,
Okay.
which is awful. That
Yeah.
sucks. But to consider how challenging the road is and how many hundreds of thousands of motorcyclists come through there over the course of a year, it's pretty remarkable numbers. You almost go anywhere else that there's any kind of concentration of motorcycles, and you're going to see way higher numbers. Daytona Bike Week will be 18 fatalities in one
Right.
week.
Right. Right.
The Motor Mile in nearby Maryville has way more fatalities, several per month versus, per year on the Dragon. But the Dragon just gets so reported, everything
Right.
that happens out there is viral. It's probably video, there's so many cameras, there's so many people running cameras. So anything that happens, it usually gets captured and spreads, And then it's interesting when we used to go and do these motorcycle shows for the IMS up north, and we'd represent the county and tell the Dragon and tourism for Graham County. People would say, I want to go, but I hear about how dangerous it is, and we're in Ohio or something, and I'm like, hey, look, this is how I put it to you. Like, if somebody wrecks on your road here in Ohio, on Ohio State Road 17, that's maybe famous for motorcycling or whatever,
Right.
do you think I'm going to hear about it back in North Carolina?
Right.
No. If somebody wrecks on the Dragon, are you going to hear about it? Probably.
Right.
It's so over-reported that there's this lopsided sort of hazardous nature to it that sort of works against it, but works for it. People don't do it because it's safe. They don't ride motorcycles because it's safe. It's a fun, exhilarating, challenging thing. It's like skydiving or anything. You know that what you're getting into and why people come here.
Right.
But there's, like you said, there's so many good roads, and it steals the thunder. There's really just great riding all around the area, and you got to do the Dragon, check it off, get your photo.
Yeah, exactly. Get your
Take
photo
it off your bucket list. But
yeah.
Yeah, spread out and see some of the other roads around the area. And if you can stay in Robbinsville, I call it like the center of the spider web. It's all these good roads that branch out. If you stay in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg, you get more options for nightlife and stuff like that.
Right.
But you're also sort of on the outside of the spider web, so you've got to
Right.
kind of get into it. And it'll take you a couple hours from there. So you got to figure, 2 to 4 hours a day are just getting to the good roads from there
Right.
versus being in them if you're staying, in the middle here.
Well, yeah, I mean, right there that branches off of, connects at the end of the Dragon, NC 28, known
Yep.
as sometimes Moonshiner 28. That is such a great scenic flowing road. I've been on that one many times. It's a lot of fun. Cherahela Skyway, which is not as technical, but it's, got fantastic views.
Yeah, Mile High,
Yeah.
Mile High Road, fantastic flowing road. Yeah.
So, I mean, you and your wife work together. You've got a team of people that work with. Do you guys shoot other roads, or you pretty much concentrate your efforts on Tail of the Dragon?
Yeah, we have, and we do shoot some of the other roads, but we just found that it's kind of pointless. The pictures don't look that much different. And everybody thinks on the Skyway we can get this beautiful wide panoramic shot of them on their motorcycle.
Yeah.
But the reality of photography is you can't get a wide shot and not end up with a small subject in that shot. And then when you shrink that down and put a million of them on the storefront, you can't find your damn picture.
Yeah.
You're just stuck
Good point. Good point.
in this shot, and there's 5,000 of those types of shots, and it gets very hard. So the Skyway, we've tried it a few times, and what we found is that the traffic is way less dense. And so you just sit there for long periods of time with nothing to do, nothing going by.
Right.
And then most of the people that are on the Skyway are on the Dragon also. So we just get redundancy problems with that. So I would like to be able to sort of work with photographers in other parts of the country that are farther away from here and have a network of photographers. And we might be able to do that as internet becomes more faster in this area. But for right now, our internet speed is just so limiting. We can't transfer gigabytes of data onto our servers so that we can fill orders like we need to. So fiber optic and stuff is coming, and that might change things for us. So we'll see.
I mean, I was at the Americade rally a few years ago. That's up in Lake George, New York. That gets a lot of attendees. It's also quite scenic. And there was a guy on some road who had a little banner set up and was shooting some photos. And so I would think that maybe would be, I mean, I'm sure you've thought of this, but like that would be where you've got this like target rich environment where you've got a lot of people, you've got a few scenic roads. Sturgis would be a great place, where you find a good scenic location in Sturgis, and you just, could do that. And then you shoot for 10 days and work your ass off, but you'd have a million, photos, and a bunch of people would be through there. So, yeah.
It used to be that we couldn't really justify taking myself or somebody away from the Dragon and go do that. But it probably could, but now we've gotten to the point where we're a little more self-sustaining business model, and I don't have to be out there on the road as much ever now. I've got a good team of guys that just crush it. And then we've gotten the business to where we've got some help filling orders and things, so the wife and I can sort of step away and do those things together. But we're moving more towards video and videography stuff and trying to provide that service now. So I'm not sure I could go do those things. It comes down to what I really have fun doing and want to do. And I don't know if I want to sit on the side of the road for even 2 or 3 days at one of those events and just, grind it out there shooting those photos when I don't really have to do that. We're doing okay, and I'm happy with our income. I mean, obviously you always want more, but I'm pretty happy with where we are. So now I'm just doing things that I really enjoy, and I really am having fun getting video and shooting video for people and doing that type of thing for businesses. Also, we've been working with some companies on doing professional videography. And
so how does the video work for, I mean, are you talking about like on Tail of Dragon? Because like I know when you do ride by, you're doing a bunch of individual photo stills, they're action shots, but how does it work on the video side? I'm not talking about commercial clients necessarily, but
personal level. Tail of the Dragon. They can hire us for like hours or a day, and then we'll just work with them to get as much footage as we can from different things. I fly the drone. We've got the rig on the vehicle that I can film them with, and then we can do audio stuff as well. And then I just deliver that product. If they want to edit, if I've got time, I can edit, but I don't typically have time, so they have to just figure that out themselves. But yeah, we typically work one-on-one. I would like to be able to provide a video of each person going by, kind of like we would do with photos. But there's still not a real viable means of hosting and protecting that video from being stolen, and delivering the product properly and things like this. It's still kind of just too too time consuming for, again, what I want to do. I don't see myself
Yeah. I
wanting to
mean,
get
and for
mired down in
most ride bys, just it would be such a short clip for most
Yep.
people that it would be hardly worth it,
And then we've got them going by in two different directions. So somebody's going to complain because I didn't get them because somebody's going the other way. It
Yeah.
just it gets ugly. And if there's a
Yeah.
line of bikes, you can't focus on
Yeah.
any one bike. So that's where the roadside video would kind of work. Like we
Yeah.
would just set up a GoPro, basically shooting one turn where our guy was photographing, and people would like go in and find their clip and share it with their friends, but it wasn't a very cinematic,
Right. Right.
it was more of like a security camera type feed.
Right.
And
Well, I
so
mean, like
fixed
when
camera.
we were shooting the Continental launch, and that this often happens at photo shoots and press launch stuff. Like you said, you've got a rig where you can set up a camera card where you can basically do what they call rollers or tracking shots, where you're basically following the car, right off the bumper, and you've got this great, action sequence that's, it's just the bike, and it's this, very up close.
Fills the frame.
Yeah, some of those photos from that when we were going around the track at the BMW Performance Center look great, but that's like you said, you got to work with people one-on-one. You can't
Because
do that like
you
catch as
have
catch
no,
can.
well, you know this, but most people have no idea how many photos it takes to get those one or two bangers. You got to take
Yeah,
1,000 photos
right,
and then dig through all that to find 5 or 10 good shots.
right,
You take so many bad shots with that, so you definitely have to spend some one-on-one time with a
right.
person to bang out those types of shots, but they end up being phenomenal when they are good. Yeah.
I mean, when we do a photo shoot, I mean, again, it's typically like us, I'll go out with a photographer. We work with a guy locally we've been working with for years, and we'll go out and we'll spend all afternoon until it gets
Yep.
dark. And typically that late light photography is the
Is
best.
the
But
best.
we're going to run maybe 12 photos in the magazine, and especially if it's a
Mhm.
cover shot, we do a dedicated cover setup location, and then we do several setups for different actions, sides of the bike and different backgrounds, and then statics and all that is in a single corner where especially if we're shooting a cover, it's maybe it's late light, sun's going down. I mean, I've done 50 or 60 passes in the same corner. And I'm talking about just a short shot through a corner. You do a quick turnaround,
Yep.
U-turn, often on a narrow little, mountain road. And then I go back and you do it as many times as you can, as quickly as you can. And it is,
Yep.
and so everyone seems to think that, oh, they just captured that one photo and it's that simple, but as well as anybody that there's way more effort in making the sausage in terms of the number of shots that are required, the editing that's required to get that one,
It's a
like you
grind
said, really
on
good banger shot.
it's
Yeah,
a grind on all parties too. It's you on the bike going back and forth. We've done some of these organized professional shoots where we were the subject, not necessarily the photography. And I gather up a group of people. They're like, we need like 12 riders to come shoot this clip for this 4D movie that we're making. For instance, we did one of these for Pigeon Forge Theater, and they brought in this professional drone operator, and it was in like the winter. They wanted to come shoot on the Skyway, and I tell people it's like it's not going to be fun. It's not what you think, so just if you want to do this and be a part of this, that's cool, but come in with the right
right.
mindset. If you've never done a professional shoot before, you've got to understand that it's 99% sitting around suck time frame, and then 1% actually doing something exciting, and then park and wait while everybody resets. And so like you going back and forth, you're spending more time turning around than you are riding that corner, and it's
Yeah,
not
I mean, it's
not a good
exactly. I
time.
mean, that's the joke is like we don't really ride bikes; we just turn them around. I mean, and again, I've done
Yeah,
U-turns on
absolutely.
big Harley, touring bikes,
You
900
get
pounds.
really good at that part too,
And
right?
then, I mean, it's like doing that on a little lane and a half wide, gravel strewn, pitched road. It's just, it's nuts. But I had a friend come in, like, we had like a 5-bike sport touring comparison a number of years ago, and we needed bodies on bikes. And I invited a buddy of mine to come along. And about halfway through that experience I mean, the ride was fun, but then with all the photography and cleaning the bikes and getting everything ready, setting things up, and then doing the photo passes, he's like, hey, thanks for inviting me, but don't invite me again. He's like, I like to ride motorcycles. I do it for fun. This is too much like work. And I'm like, well, it
Exactly.
is,
You've got to get them in the right headspace before they even get there.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they will really be disappointed. But it can turn into some, just wait and see what we get, because it's
sure.
like
Yeah,
you don't understand how good this can be
right,
until you see it at the end. And if that doesn't excite people, they're not turned on by those things, then it's
right,
not for them. But
right.
some people, a lot of people can really appreciate what you end up getting. It's like, whoa, you didn't expect that. good of a thing. And that's always very rewarding to me, is to surprise people with how good the content ends up being.
Sure.
Again, like under promise, over deliver, just really a big thing to me.
Well, I can certainly invite people to go to killboy.com and check out your website, because there's not only the individual, like you said, there's thousands of photos of people that are passing through on Tail of Dragon, but you've got a cool section of scenic photos that are really just stunners. I mean, they're like wall art. You can, purchase those of the mountains there in the Appalachians. It's really stunning stuff. So, I mean, again, I total respect, man. You said that you started this off as a hobby. You bought a point and shoot digital camera from Circuit City in the late 90s, didn't know what you were doing, and you've grown it into not only becoming a skilled photographer, but having a successful business. So, hey, man, respect. You worked your ass off and you've done well. So that's great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but it's also just being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
A lot of success is more predicated, I think, on that than hard work. There's a lot of people working really hard out there that are struggling.
Sure.
That work harder than me, but I just happened to have my options open to the point that I could step away from what I was doing and not get too worried about that. And I was very fortunate in that regard at that time. It's something that even my parents and my dad, bless him, he kind of doubted, he never told me this, but he kind of was like, I don't know what he thinks he's doing, quitting his job and going to sit on the side of the road, take pictures. And at the end, he was very proud of me and couldn't believe how well it did.
Yeah.
And I could tell it meant a lot to him,
Sure. Well, I mean, like I say, it's a self-made business, and that, that's kind of the American entrepreneurial spirit. And, you never know. I mean, when you got started doing this as a hobby, you probably had no idea where you were going to end up with it.
No way.
But you employ other people. You've got a team of people. You've made a name for yourself, have a reputation. And as you said, you've got customers who reach out to you and say, hey, man, I really appreciate these photos you did, because they meant a lot to me. It was a ride with my dad or with my son, or it's the last ride that somebody was on before something happened to them, they passed on or something. So, hey, that's great. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time. It's been good talking to you. I'm glad I finally had a chance to meet you in person at that Continental launch. Meet you and your wife, and be able to sort of tell you the personal story about me, you capturing my embarrassing crash on my first press launch, but I'm glad that didn't happen at the Continental launch.
So, you did good, man. Yeah, saved it.
Awesome. Well, we'll have a link to killboy.com. Can people find you on social media as well, or is it mostly just go to your website?
Oh yeah, we've got pretty strong Facebook and Instagram accounts. So if you just search for killboy.com on either of those, they'll show up. And our YouTube channel has over 1,000 videos on it.
Wow.
Same thing. Killboy, spelled out DOTCOM at the end, is typically our social media stuff.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's a good thing. You managed to get a memorable short handle.
Yeah, it's a little morbid, but it sticks, and it's short, like you said.
Yeah,
so
it's memorable. Okay. Yeah. So, well, hey, thanks again for your time, and for the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, I'm Greg Drevenstedt. Thanks for listening. Keep the rubber side down. If you've enjoyed listening to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, please subscribe, leave us a positive rating, and tell your friends. We also encourage you to visit ridermagazine.com, where you can get the latest in motorcycle news and reviews, and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You can also subscribe to print and digital editions of Rider Magazine, which is published 12 times a year. Thanks again for listening.